It's been a long while since I started planning what my first car would be, so naturally I've got something I never thought of until I sat in it. The insurance vultures had finally killed off any hope of my being able to afford an X-Type, my original best candidate for a first car, so I've been looking at a potentially cheaper alternative in the Rover 75 when my dad came across an old Rover dealership just outside of Bristol. SMG Rover. Specialising in the cars they once sold new, they even had some of their original stock, no more miles on them than what it took to get them to the dealer. My dad had found a dark green Rover 75 within my budget, which looked promising, when I noticed there was also an MG ZS within my reach. With that in mind, we set off to look at the Rover, me with images in my mind of fedoras, long coats and tweed suits that would fit the Rover's beige upholstery. Walking into the main showroom was like walking to the 1990s. Light brown brickwork, wooden panelling and a red carpet. Fantastic! Then we got to the Rover 75, and as much as it was nice, the interior felt very classy. I thought I'd look a bit aloof showing up to university in it. Even if it's actually an old second-hand Rover, your average student would probably just see posh arse. Not to mention there were a few patches of paintwork peeling and some bubbled chrome details, and the underside was, well, rusted is the nice way of putting it. The more I looked, the more I appreciated the styling. I just suspected I'd look a bit out of place behind the wheel, not to mention it actually being quite a large car for a learner, and by a brief once-over, a possible money pit. Then we thought we'd take a look at the MG, the 75 being a bust. Now, it may be a rebadged Rover, but that's really not so bad. Also, the styling is suitably teenage to blend into the crowd a bit more. And as MG is one of my favourite marques, as soon as I sat in the driver's seat and had a big burgundy MG on the steering wheel in front of me, it just felt right. After a keen once-over for my ever-diligent dad, we were soon being driven down the road by the salesman, and gosh did it make a jolly good sound. Although a 1.8 litre, which with slightly worse miles per gallon than most teenagers would perhaps consider appropriate, it sounded like a lion that had stubbed its toe to me. Bloody marvellous. The more I saw of this car, the more I loved it. The classic sports-inspired circular air conditioning vents, the very nice leather gear knob, the fold-down back seats, my mum told me I'd need those, the little British and checkered flags behind the doors, plus I have bolts around my exhaust. Do you have bolts around your exhaust? No! The brake lights are a bit Rover. In fact, they have Rover written on them, but other than that, the styling is rather nice. The list goes on, but mostly it's just little hints of classic MG-ness. So my dad switched in the village and he drove it back, given I couldn't with a provisional licence obviously. He felt the clutch was very nice and crisp, snappy gear change in the lot, similar to the Rover 600 we used to have as a family car before the seats went mouldy. And I have to say, after having driven a Mini to learn in and now my MG, it's like going from a pair of spongy slippers to some walking boots. More my style and a lot more capable. So we got back to the dealership and I paid the deposit. Or rather, my dad did, because I'd forgotten to put enough money in my current account. When we got back, we organised when we'd pick it up, arranging to be collected at the train station by the salesman. So before I knew it, I found myself on a train to Bristol with my dad at 9 AM, commenting on how much quieter the newer trains were and the Brunel designed tunnel we passed through. We got picked up at the station, and then after a mishap with a visa pin and a left-on caps lock, I owned a car. Just like that. Sitting in the MG before we left for home was such a bizarre sensation. As I said when we stopped in a car park on the way back for me to have a first spin, it was odd to be in something so unfamiliar knowing it would become so familiar. After a brief incident with the car park curb, my dad took over and drove us to just round the corner from home, and L-plates on, I did the last winding stretch, just because Mum wanted a picture. I've been on a 2-hour drive down the Foss Way, which was lovely, even if I got stuck behind a vintage double-decker bus. The guy in the back of it had a good laugh though, and we were going 2 miles an hour up a hill. I have a key with MG on it, and the remote works from exactly half a metre. Yes, really. It has revs. I've not owned something with revs before. It has a checkered flag on it. Must add at least 5 brake horsepower. A gorgeous knob. Overall, I'm really happy with my MG ZS, despite not even thinking of getting one until about 3 days before I did. It has hints of classic sports cars, even if not as many as I'd like, or as much classic elegance, but as far as the cars I see other teenagers driving on the roads go, I think I've done pretty well, really. At the end of the day, it makes me grin, and that's what matters. I look forward to many interesting years on the British roads with it to come.